I'm Natalie Davidson, 32, a financial advisor who always believed family came first. That was until last Thanksgiving when my sister Adriana stood up and announced they'd voted me out of the family. Everyone cheered. They didn't know I'd discovered how they'd stolen nearly $300,000 from me over 3 years. I laughed softly and said, "Then I guess you won't need this." I placed a folder on the table. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're viewing from and subscribe to join our community of survivors. Like this video if you've ever had to stand up against family betrayal. Growing up in the Davidson household meant understanding my place early on. As the eldest daughter, I learned responsibility while watching my younger sister Adriana bask in perpetual adoration. Our dynamic wasn't subtle, it was written into the fabric of our daily lives with painful clarity. My parents, Eleanor and Richard Davidson, had what I can only describe as a blind spot when it came to Adriana. While she possessed undeniable charisma with her effortless social grace and infectious laugh, the disparity in how we were treated went beyond natural parental differences. It was systematic favoritism that shaped our entire childhood. In 3rd grade, I brought home straight A's and a special commendation from the principal for my science project. Mom glanced at my report card, said, "Good job, Natalie," and returned to helping Adriana prepare for her dance recital. Later that week, Adriana received a participation certificate for that same recital, not even a placing, and our parents took the entire family out for a celebratory dinner, presenting her with a new bicycle as a reward for her dedication. This pattern repeated throughout our childhood. When I qualified for the state mathematics competition in 7th grade, my transportation became a logistical burden requiring me to ride with another family. Meanwhile, Adriana's soccer games, a sport she played indifferently at best, warranted schedule rearrangements and enthusiastic attendance from both parents regardless of distance. By high school, I'd internalized that my achievements would never receive equal recognition. While I served as editor of the school newspaper, maintained perfect grades, and secured multiple academic awards, family conversations revolved around Adriana's social life and the colleges that might offer her sports scholarships despite her average athletic ability. The college years illuminated our different paths with stark financial reality. Despite being accepted to several prestigious universities, my parents informed me that I would need to rely on scholarships and loans. "You're so smart, Natalie. You'll figure it out," my father said with casual dismissal. Adriana, whose grades barely secured her admission to a mid-tier state school, received full parental financial support, a new car for campus transportation, and a generous monthly allowance. Rather than succumb to resentment, I channeled my energy into independence. I worked 3 part-time jobs throughout college, tutoring wealthy students, weekend shifts at a local bookstore, and virtual assistant work that I completed during late nights. I graduated with honors, minimal student debt, and something more valuable, self-reliance. My entry into the financial sector wasn't glamorous, but it was effective. Starting in an entry-level position at Kingston Financial Services, I applied the same work ethic that had carried me through school. Within 4 years, I had received 3 promotions, nearly doubled my salary, and established a reputation as someone who could explain complex financial matters to clients with clarity and patience. At 27, I purchased my first home, a modest but charming 2-bedroom condominium in a desirable neighborhood. I still remember the closing day, sitting alone at the table signing documents, feeling both immense pride and a twinge of sadness that no family member had offered to accompany me for this milestone. I'd invited them. My mother claimed a hair appointment she couldn't reschedule. My father vaguely mentioned work stuff, and Adriana simply didn't respond to my text. The first request for financial assistance came 3 months after I moved into my condo. My father called on a Tuesday evening, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Natalie, I hate to ask this, but I've had some unexpected medical bills. Nothing serious, just some tests they wanted to run. Insurance didn't cover everything. I'm about $5,000 short, and with your expertise in financial matters, I thought maybe you could help out temporarily." Despite our complicated history, concern for my father's health overrode any hesitation. I transferred the money that night, asking only when he might be able to repay it. His answer was noncommittal. As soon as possible, sweetheart, but I chose to trust him. 6 months later, Adriana announced her engagement to Marcus Walsh, a charming pharmaceutical sales representative she'd been dating for just under a year. 2 weeks after their engagement party, she called me. "Nat, you know how much your support means to me," she began, though we both knew that wasn't true. "Marcus and I are planning our dream wedding, but venue deposits are so expensive these days. Mom and Dad are helping, but we're still about $15,000 short. Since you're doing so well at your fancy job, I thought maybe you could contribute." As my sister? The "as my sister" part stung, a reminder of our connection only when it served her purposes. Still, I wanted to believe this could be a turning point in our relationship. I agreed to provide the money as a wedding gift, telling myself it was an investment in our future sisterhood. 3 months after Adriana's wedding, my mother called about her car needing repairs, $3,000 worth. Again, I transferred the money, this time with a gentle reminder about the previous loans. Both my parents assured me they were working on repayment plans. Adriana never mentioned money at all after her wedding, acting as though the $15,000 had been a gift that required no acknowledgement. As I approved each transfer, I failed to recognize I wasn't helping my family. I was establishing a pattern that would eventually threaten everything I'd worked to build. The foundation for exploitation had been laid, brick by brick, justified by blood ties that were already beginning to feel like shackles. The trickle of financial requests soon became a steady stream, then a flood that threatened to drown me. What began as occasional emergencies evolved into an expectation of regular support that increased in both frequency and amount. In the spring following Adriana's wedding, my parents invited me to Sunday dinner, something that had become rare since my sister's nuptials. The reason for the invitation became clear when coffee was served. "We've been thinking about finally renovating the kitchen and master bathroom," my mother announced, showing me elaborate Pinterest boards she'd created. The contractor gave us a quote of $75,000. My father cleared his throat. "We were hoping you might consider investing in the property. We'd add your name to the deed, of course. It's a family home, and property values in this neighborhood have been steadily increasing." The request was for $50,000, an amount that would significantly impact my savings but was framed as an investment opportunity rather than a loan. Despite my financial training screaming caution, family obligations spoke louder. I agreed, requesting formal documentation of the arrangement. My father seemed slightly offended but agreed, promising to have papers drawn up. 2 months later, those papers still hadn't materialized despite multiple reminders. The renovation, however, proceeded rapidly. Around the same time, Adriana called in tears. Marcus had unexpectedly lost his job due to company restructuring. They needed temporary support to cover their mortgage and car payments while he searched for new employment. The request was for $3,000 monthly, with assurances it would be short-term. "We're family, Nat," Adriana said. "We'd do the same for you." I knew this wasn't true, but hope is a persistent weed. I established the monthly transfers, telling myself it was building goodwill and demonstrating the kind of familial support I'd always wished for myself. 3 months into supporting Adriana and Marcus, my sister approached me with what she called an amazing opportunity. She wanted to start a boutique marketing agency focusing on local businesses. Her business plan was glossy but vague, filled with industry jargon but light on financial projections. "I need an investor who believes in me," she explained over an expensive lunch she'd invited me to, but conveniently forgot her wallet. "Someone who understands this is about more than money. It's about family, supporting each other's dreams." The investment request was $100,000 for a 15% stake in the business. Against my professional judgment, I agreed to $75,000 for 25%, insisting on proper documentation and regular financial reports. Adriana hugged me tightly, declaring this would bring us closer than ever as sister entrepreneurs. For nearly a year, I believed I was helping my family while building stronger relationships. The signs of exploitation remained hidden behind grateful smiles and promises of repayment soon. Then came the credit alert. While reviewing my credit report, a routine practice I recommend to all clients, I noticed 3 recent inquiries I hadn't authorized. Digging deeper, I discovered loan applications submitted with my personal information as a cosigner. I hadn't signed any such applications. This discovery prompted closer scrutiny of my parents' renovated home during my next visit. The upgrades far exceeded the $75,000 budget they'd initially discussed. New furniture, high-end appliances, and luxury fixtures suggested spending well above $100,000. When I casually mentioned the impressive scope, my mother vaguely referenced finding good deals and quickly changed the subject. Adriana's social media provided the next red flag. Despite claims that her business was building slowly but steadily and Marcus was still interviewing for the perfect position, her Instagram showcased weekend trips to wine country, designer purchases, and a lifestyle incongruent with their claimed financial struggles. My growing suspicions prompted a request to review Adriana's business financial statements, as our agreement entitled me to quarterly reports that had never materialized. What should have been a routine business conversation exploded into a family crisis. "You don't trust me?" Adriana shouted across her expensively furnished living room. "After everything I've done to include you in my life. This is exactly why we've always had problems. You think you're better than everyone with your financial expertise and perfect planning." When I maintained that reviewing finances was standard for any investment, she called our parents, who arrived within 30 minutes. The conversation quickly shifted from business accountability to my pattern of emotional detachment and inability to support family without conditions. Investments between family members shouldn't be treated like corporate transactions, my father lectured, somehow transforming my reasonable request into an emotional offense. I left that evening feeling disoriented and questioning my own judgment. The gaslighting was effective precisely because it came from the people who should have been most trustworthy. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew rapidly. Rather than confront my family directly again, I decided to investigate quietly. I hired Bryce Miller, a private financial investigator recommended by a colleague, to look into the financial activities connected to my investments and loans. Bryce's findings exceeded my worst fears. The business Adriana had started existed primarily on paper, with minimal client activity and questionable expenses. Multiple withdrawals from the business account matched deposits to her personal account, classic commingling of funds. The $75,000 investment had largely funded personal expenses and transfers to my parents. More disturbing were documents bearing what appeared to be my signature, signatures I had never provided. The investment in my parents' home renovation had never been documented legally. My name had not been added to the property deed despite over $50,000 transferred to their account. In total, Bryce estimated nearly $300,000 had been diverted from me through various means over 3 years. His written report included a devastating line. The pattern indicates coordinated family activity rather than isolated incidents of financial opportunism. My family hadn't just taken advantage of my generosity, they had systematically exploited and defrauded me. The people who should have protected me had instead seen me as nothing more than a convenient source of funding for their lifestyles. The evidence was overwhelming, but the emotional reality remained impossible to process fully. How could I reconcile the smiling family photos on my wall with the documented proof of their betrayal? The financial advisor who counseled clients daily on protecting their assets had failed to protect herself from the most intimate form of financial abuse. With Bryce's report in hand, I faced the most difficult decision of my life: confront my family directly, pursue legal action, or attempt to distance myself quietly without resolution. The choice I made would irreversibly alter all our lives and lead directly to that fateful Thanksgiving dinner. Armed with Bryce's detailed report, I scheduled a consultation with Benjamin Hayes, attorney specializing in financial fraud cases. His office, unlike the flashy downtown firms with marble lobbies and intimidating receptionists, occupied a converted Victorian house with worn leather chairs and bookshelves overflowing with legal texts. Benjamin himself projected calm competence with his salt and pepper beard and direct gaze. Family financial fraud cases are unfortunately common, he explained after reviewing my documentation. But yours is exceptionally well documented, which gives us several options. Benjamin outlined 3 potential paths: criminal charges for the forgery and fraud, civil litigation to recover the funds, or a structured settlement approach that would avoid court entirely if my family cooperated. Each option carried different emotional and practical consequences. The criminal route would likely result in the most complete financial recovery, but would almost certainly destroy any possibility of family reconciliation, he explained. Civil litigation maintains focus on the financial aspects, but still becomes adversarial. A settlement approach might recover less money, but could preserve some relationship, if that matters to you. The question hung in the air. Did maintaining family relationships matter after such betrayal? I wasn't sure. Let's prepare for all 3 scenarios. I finally decided. I want to see if they'll take responsibility when confronted before deciding how aggressively to pursue this. Over the next 2 weeks, Benjamin and I organized the evidence into a comprehensive folder. Bank statements were highlighted to show the flow of funds. Forged documents were paired with examples of my authentic signature. Emails between family members discussing financial requests were printed and annotated. The folder became a physical manifestation of the betrayal, impossible to dismiss or explain away. As we completed the documentation process, an unexpected text arrived from my mother. Thanksgiving at our house this year. 4 p.m. The whole family will be there, and we really need you to come. It's important. The timing seemed suspicious. I hadn't spoken to any family members since beginning my investigation, deliberately creating distance while I processed Bryce's findings. Now, suddenly, my presence was important at a family gathering. More texts followed. My father, looking forward to having everyone together for the holiday. We've missed you. Adriana, can't wait to see you at Thanksgiving. I have exciting news to share. Even Marcus sent a message. Hope you can make it. Family holidays matter. The coordinated outreach felt orchestrated, especially given the previous months of minimal contact. When I didn't immediately confirm my attendance, my mother's calls became daily occurrences. You have to come, Natalie. Everyone's asking about you. Don't you care about family traditions anymore? Her guilt tactics were familiar, but held new significance now that I understood the financial motivations potentially driving them. Confused by the sudden attention, I met my best friend Sophia Ramirez for coffee. Sophia had known me since college and had witnessed my family dynamics firsthand over the years. It sounds like a trap, she said bluntly after hearing about the Thanksgiving invitation. They might suspect you're onto them and want to control the narrative. Or maybe they genuinely want to reconnect, I offered, hating how easily I still slipped into making excuses for them. Sophia's expression softened. Nat, I know you want to believe that, but you need to protect yourself here. If you go, have a plan for every scenario. She was right. I called Benjamin that afternoon to discuss strategies for a potential confrontation. We agreed I would bring copies of key documents, not originals, and would record any conversations in accordance with state law. I would attend with boundaries firmly in place, and the folder as my protection. Remember, you don't owe them explanations for your discoveries, Benjamin advised. You're the wronged party here. Don't let them flip the script. As Thanksgiving approached, my emotional state fluctuated wildly. Some moments brought clarity and resolve. I would attend, present the evidence calmly, and demand accountability. Other moments brought crushing doubt. Maybe I had misinterpreted their actions. Maybe family financial boundaries were naturally different from business ones. Maybe confrontation would destroy my last connection to family. The night before Thanksgiving, I stood in my closet deliberating over my outfit choice with absurd intensity. Professional attire might signal I was approaching this as a business matter. Casual clothes might suggest I remained unaware of their deception. I finally selected a burgundy sweater dress, festive enough for the holiday but structured enough to project confidence. I prepared the folder with methodical precision, ensuring every document told part of the narrative while the collection revealed the complete picture. I slipped it into a nondescript tote bag alongside my phone, fully charged for recording, and a small notebook for any new information that might emerge. On Thanksgiving morning, I received a final text from Adriana. Can't wait to see you today. I have something important to tell everyone. The message sent a chill through me despite the warm language. Benjamin called for a final strategy review. Remember, stay calm regardless of what happens. Don't let emotions dictate your response. You have the evidence. You have the truth. As I drove to my parents' house that afternoon, the familiar route felt suddenly foreign. Each turn brought me closer to a confrontation that would either begin healing through accountability or sever family ties permanently. The folder on the passenger seat represented both protection and proof, the truth I carried into whatever awaited me. Pulling into the driveway of my childhood home, I took a deep breath and rehearsed Benjamin's advice once more. Then I gathered my tote bag, straightened my shoulders, and walked toward the front door with the strange sense that regardless of what happened inside, I would leave fundamentally changed. The transformation of my parents' home hit me immediately upon entering. The modest split-level house I'd grown up in had undergone dramatic changes since my last visit 3 months earlier. The entryway now featured marble flooring replacing the worn carpet I'd known for decades. Custom lighting fixtures cast an elegant glow over walls newly painted in trendy gray tones. A massive statement mirror, which I recognized as a designer piece costing upwards of $2,000, dominated the wall where family photos once hung. Natalie, you made it! My mother's voice carried from the kitchen, followed by her appearance in an outfit that looked fresh from a department store, price tags possibly removed that morning. Her embrace felt performative, too tight and too brief. Everyone's in the living room. Your father just opened wine. The living room renovation was even more striking. The furniture I'd helped my parents select from discount warehouses years ago had been replaced with what appeared to be custom pieces. The entertainment center housed a television at least 20 inches larger than their previous model. Artwork I didn't recognize hung on walls that had been moved or removed entirely to open the concept, as my mother proudly explained while guiding me through. The renovations turned out beautifully, I commented, noting mentally how the actual work far exceeded the $75,000 budget they'd originally presented when requesting my investment. Yes, we were very fortunate with timing, my father replied vaguely, handing me a glass of what I recognized as a $60 bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon, a significant upgrade from the $12 wines that had been their standard. The contractor gave us an excellent rate, and we found some great deals on furnishings. I nodded, cataloging each inconsistency between their claimed financial situation and the evident luxury surrounding us. The kitchen, visible through the now-open floor plan, displayed high-end appliances with familiar brand names I'd recently priced for my own condo renovations. The refrigerator alone represented a $5,000 expenditure. My cousin Vanessa Mitchell sat somewhat apart from the main conversation group, nursing her wine with unusual intensity. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away, then back with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Vanessa and I had been close as children but had drifted as adults, connected mainly through holiday gatherings such as this one. How have you been, Vanessa? I asked, sitting beside her. Fine, busy with work, she replied, her voice tight. You look good, Natalie. Thanks. Is everything okay? You seem uncomfortable. Vanessa glanced toward my parents, then Adriana, who had yet to acknowledge my arrival despite being only feet away. Just holiday stress, you know how it is. She took a large sip of wine. Have you talked to Adriana lately? Before I could answer, the front door opened and Adriana arrived with Marcus, making an entrance that commanded attention. Her designer coat came off to reveal an expensive dress I'd seen in a magazine recently for nearly $800. Marcus wore a watch I didn't recall him owning before, the kind that signaled prosperity rather than telling time. Sorry we're late, Adriana announced without actual apology. Traffic was ridiculous. Her gaze finally landed on me, and her expression shifted momentarily before settling into practiced warmth. Natalie, you actually came. The surprise in her voice contradicted her earlier text messages expressing excitement about my attendance. The hugs and greetings that followed felt choreographed, everyone hitting their marks with precision but little genuine emotion. Marcus's handshake lasted a beat too long, his eye contact too intense, as if assessing whether I posed a threat. Throughout the next hour, I observed multiple cell phone checks followed by meaningful glances between family members. Twice, Adriana pulled Marcus into whispered conversations just out of earshot, their eyes occasionally darting toward me. When my mother suggested I help her in the kitchen, Adriana suddenly appeared beside us, inserting herself into what might have been a private conversation. The kitchen revealed more evidence of extensive spending. The small update my parents had initially described had transformed into a complete renovation with custom cabinetry, quartz countertops, and professional-grade appliances. "The refrigerator is gorgeous," I commented casually. "Viking, right? Those run about $5,000 these days." My mother's hand paused briefly while arranging appetizers. "Oh, we found it on clearance. Barely used floor model." The lie came easily, smoothly delivered while she avoided eye contact. "I'm surprised you remembered the emergency fund I gave you last year covered a new refrigerator. I thought that was for car repairs." Before my mother could respond, Adriana interrupted with forced brightness. "Mom, didn't you say we should start setting the table? Marcus can help Dad with carving while we do that." The dining room table itself was new, a substantial piece that could comfortably seat 12, though only 8 places were set. I recognized it as similar to one I'd admired in a high-end furniture store for approximately $4,000. The settings featured china I'd never seen before, replacing the family heirloom set my grandmother had passed down that was supposedly being safely stored for future generations. As we arranged place settings, I noticed the strategic seating arrangement. My assigned seat positioned me at maximum distance from both the kitchen and the primary conversation hub, isolated at the far end while Adriana occupied the space beside our father at the head. "Where are Grandma's china plates?" I asked, running my finger along the edge of what appeared to be newly purchased tableware. "In storage," my mother replied quickly. "These are more practical for larger gatherings. But we only have 8 people tonight, and Grandma's set serves 12. Adriana intervened again. "These photograph better for social media. The old ones look dated." The comment revealed volumes about priorities, appearance over sentiment, presentation over history. As we finished the table arrangement, I noticed Vanessa watching me with something like pity in her expression. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away, busying herself with napkin folding. Multiple family members checked their phones simultaneously after a distinct notification sound, suggesting a group message. Expressions shifted subtly after reading whatever had been sent. Marcus glanced at me with what appeared to be anticipation, quickly masked when I caught his eye. The choreography of movement throughout the house felt deliberate, designed to prevent me from having extended conversations with any one person. When I approached my father with a direct question about the business investment in Adriana's company, my mother suddenly needed his help with the turkey. When I began discussing financial matters with Vanessa, Adriana appeared with drink refills and a conversation redirect. As we finally gathered around the table, the tension had built to a palpable pressure in the room. My father's Thanksgiving blessing ran longer than usual, filled with emphatic statements about true family loyalty and supporting those who support you. Adriana kept glancing at her watch, then exchanging looks with Marcus across the table. The elaborate feast before us represented another inconsistency: premium ingredients and gourmet preparations that contradicted my parents' claimed budget constraints. The organic heritage turkey alone would have cost upwards of $100, not including the array of side dishes prepared with obvious expense and care. Conversation during the initial serving remained superficial, comments about food, mild gossip about absent relatives, and carefully constructed questions about my work that avoided specifics about finances or success. Each time I tried steering conversation toward more substantial topics, someone would interject with a new serving dish or abrupt subject change. I maintained my composure while mentally connecting each observation to documents in my folder. The kitchen renovation exceeding disclosed budget. The unexplained luxury purchases despite claimed financial limitations. The coordinated avoidance of financial discussions. The strategic isolation tactics. Each element confirmed what Bryce's investigation had revealed. This wasn't casual family dysfunction but calculated exploitation. As the main course concluded and before dessert arrived, Adriana set down her fork with deliberate precision and glanced at my father, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. She stood, glass in hand, commanding attention with practiced ease. The moment had arrived, though its exact nature remained unclear. Whatever script they had prepared was about to play out, and I steadied myself for what would come next, one hand discreetly reaching toward my tote bag resting beside my chair. "I'd like to make a toast," Adriana announced, her voice carrying that particular resonance she'd perfected since childhood, the tone that ensured all attention focused on her. The table fell silent as she remained standing, wine glass delicately poised between manicured fingers. "Family is the most precious gift we have," she began, her eyes moving around the table but conspicuously skipping over me. "True family supports each other unconditionally, celebrates successes together, and stands united through challenges." My father nodded solemnly. My mother dabbed at non-existent tears. Marcus straightened in his chair with the attentiveness of someone who had rehearsed his role in what was unfolding. "Unfortunately," Adriana continued, her voice hardening slightly, "sometimes we must acknowledge when someone doesn't truly embody family values. When someone proves repeatedly that they don't prioritize family bonds or support loved ones with open hearts." Her gaze finally landed on me, accompanied by a shift in her expression, something between righteousness and poorly disguised triumph. The room's atmosphere changed instantly, tension crystallizing into targeted hostility. "Natalie," she said my name like an accusation, "we've spent considerable time discussing your relationship with this family. Your constant focus on finances rather than emotional connections. Your transactional approach to family matters. Your judgment of our choices while presenting yourself as superior." I remained perfectly still, my expression neutral despite the internal earthquake of emotions. This was clearly the culmination of whatever plan had prompted my invitation, not reconciliation but formalized rejection. After careful consideration, Adriana continued with theatrical gravity. "We took a vote. Everyone agreed. We've decided you're no longer welcome as part of this family." The statement hung in the air, its calculated cruelty clearly designed to inflict maximum pain. Around the table, heads nodded in solidarity with Adriana's pronouncement. My father's expression remained stoic, my mother's tearful but resolved. Marcus smirked slightly. Only Vanessa looked down at her plate, shoulders hunched. "We voted, and you're not family anymore," Adriana repeated with finality, raising her glass slightly. "To true family," echoed around the table as glasses clinked, the ritual celebration of my excommunication complete. The room filled with a peculiar buzzing sound that I realized was simply blood rushing in my ears. Time seemed to slow as I processed what had just occurred. They had invited me to Thanksgiving dinner specifically to formally reject me, a calculated public humiliation disguised as a family gathering. For a moment, grief threatened to overwhelm me, not for the loss of these relationships as they currently existed, but for the family bonds I had spent decades hoping might eventually form. The final death of that hope deserved its moment of mourning. But as I looked around at their satisfied expressions, a strange calm clarity replaced the grief. The folder in my bag suddenly felt like a shield rather than a burden. The truth it contained offered protection against the gaslighting and manipulation that had shaped our family dynamic for decades. I laughed softly, a genuine sound of liberation that clearly wasn't the reaction they'd anticipated. Confusion rippled across their faces, uncertainty replacing smugness. "Then I guess you won't need this," I said, my voice steady as I reached into my tote bag and placed the folder precisely in the center of the table. The manila exterior gave no indication of its explosive contents, but something in my demeanor must have telegraphed its significance. Adriana recovered first. "What is that supposed to be?" she asked, attempting to maintain her position of authority, but unable to mask her sudden apprehension. Evidence, I replied simply, of approximately $300,000 stolen from me through fraud, forgery, and misrepresentation over the past 3 years. By my family. My father's face strained of color. My mother's hand froze with her wine glass halfway to her lips. Marcus shifted in his seat, eyes darting toward the nearest exit. That's ridiculous, Adriana scoffed, but her voice lacked conviction. You're just trying to create drama because you can't handle being called out on your behavior. Open it, I suggested calmly. Unless you'd prefer I summarize the contents for everyone? After a moment of tense silence, Adriana snatched the folder and flipped it open. Her expression transformed as she registered the first page, a summary spreadsheet detailing each transaction, date, stated purpose, and actual use of funds as uncovered by Bryce's investigation. This is nothing but financial records, she said dismissively, attempting to close the folder. Boring paperwork that proves nothing. Page 3 shows your signature and mine side by side on the business investment documents, I replied. Except I never signed those papers. The forgery is quite obvious to experts. Marcus leaned over to look, his pharmaceutical sales background apparently having taught him when to recognize a losing position. Adriana, he murmured urgently, we should discuss this privately. Page 7 shows the contractor's actual invoice for the kitchen renovation, I continued, addressing my parents directly. It matches exactly the $75,000 transferred from my account, despite Dad's claim that my $50,000 was only partial funding. The remaining $25,000 supposedly from your savings never existed. My father stood abruptly. This is outrageous. You come into our home and accuse us of theft. Yes, I answered simply. Because that's what happened. The evidence is quite clear. My mother attempted a different approach, tears flowing freely now. Natalie, darling, there's clearly been a misunderstanding about these arrangements. We always intended to repay you once our financial situation improved. Page 12, I countered without emotion. Email exchange between you and Dad discussing how to approach me for the kitchen loan, with explicit instructions to make it sound like an investment, so she doesn't expect repayment. Adriana began frantically flipping through the folder, her composure crumbling with each damning page. When she reached the emails between her and Marcus discussing my financial gullibility and planning how to present her business proposal to extract maximum funding, her face contorted with rage. You had no right to access private communications, she shouted, attempting to shred the documents. I remained calm, knowing copies existed with Benjamin and electronically. I had every right to investigate financial fraud committed against me, I replied. And speaking of rights, you should know this entire conversation is being legally recorded. Marcus lunged across the table, knocking over wine glasses as he attempted to grab my phone. Give me that. You can't record without consent. This is a single-party consent state, I informed him, moving my phone to safety. Only one person in the conversation needs to consent to recording, and I've consented to record myself being defrauded by my family. The carefully orchestrated dinner devolved into chaos. Adriana alternated between threats and bargaining, her voice rising to a pitch that would have embarrassed her in normal circumstances. My father attempted to assert control through volume, his face reddening dangerously. My mother collapsed into theatrical sobs that paused suspiciously whenever she thought no one was watching her directly. Throughout the commotion, I remained seated, watching their performances with the detached interest of someone observing strangers. The emotional hold they had maintained over me for decades had evaporated in the face of undeniable evidence and their predictably self-serving reactions. You'll destroy this family with these accusations, my father eventually stated, attempting to regain control of the situation. No, I corrected him quietly. You destroyed this family when you decided to exploit rather than love your daughter. I'm simply documenting what happened. Vanessa, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke. I told you all this was wrong, she said, addressing the table rather than me specifically. I told you she didn't deserve this. Adriana turned on her furiously. Shut up, Vanessa. You're just jealous you weren't included in any of the arrangements. The revelation that others had been aware of the arrangements, the systematic exploitation of my finances, confirmed the coordinated nature of their actions. This hadn't been opportunistic advantage-taking but calculated, discussed, planned fraud. Here's what happens next, I said, standing for the first time since the confrontation began. You have two options. First option, I file police reports for the fraud and forgery, submit evidence to the district attorney, and pursue maximum criminal charges alongside civil recovery of all funds with punitive damages and interest. The threat of legal consequences landed heavily in the room. Marcus, likely most familiar with potential penalties through his corporate compliance training, visibly paled. Second option, I continued, you sign legally binding repayment agreements that my attorney has prepared, with structured payment schedules, interest, and consequences for default. You acknowledge the wrongdoing in writing, and we part ways with no further contact. You would send your own family to jail over money? My mother asked incredulously, attempting to reclaim moral high ground. You would steal from your own daughter, and then publicly disown her? I countered. Apparently blood ties only matter when they benefit you. The confrontation had reached its inflection point. The folder lay open on the table, its contents scattered among overturned glasses and congealing food. Physical evidence disrupting their carefully constructed narrative just as thoroughly as it had disrupted their elaborate meal. You have 24 hours to decide, I informed them, gathering my belongings. My attorney will contact you tomorrow for your decision. Choose wisely. As I prepared to leave, Adriana made one final desperate attempt to regain control. If you walk out that door, you'll never be welcome in this house again, she threatened, echoing her earlier declaration of my excommunication. I paused at the threshold, turning back to face the table of people who had once represented everything I thought family should be. That's the first honest thing you've said tonight, I replied, and the greatest gift you could offer me. With that, I walked out of my childhood home, the weight of decades of emotional manipulation lifting with each step toward my car and the future I would build without them. The front door closed behind me with a decisive click that seemed to punctuate the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I made it precisely 3 steps down the front path before the shouting inside resumed, voices rising and competing for dominance in what had become a family free-for-all. I paused beside my car, keys in hand, and allowed myself to listen for a moment. Through the partially open dining room window came the chaos I had catalyzed, accusations flying between family members who, only minutes before, had presented a unified front against me. How could you be so careless with those emails? My father's voice, directed at Adriana. Me? You're the one who promised to destroy the renovation quotes. Adriana shot back. Everyone calmed down. She's bluffing about recordings, Marcus insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. The sound of breaking china punctuated the argument. Someone had either thrown or knocked over dishes in their agitation. More crashes followed, suggesting the carefully arranged Thanksgiving table was rapidly transforming into a casualty of their panic. I should have felt satisfaction at their distress, perhaps even vindication. Instead, a profound sadness washed over me, not for what I was losing, but for what had never actually existed. The loving family I had spent years trying to earn acceptance from had been a mirage, a performance designed to maintain access to my financial resources rather than my heart. My moment of reflection was interrupted by the front door opening again. I turned, half expecting to see my mother attempting a last emotional manipulation. Instead, Vanessa emerged, her face flushed and eyes red-rimmed. Natalie, wait, she called, hurrying down the path. I need to tell you something. I tensed, preparing for another attack or justification. Vanessa must have sensed my wariness because she stopped several feet away, hands slightly raised in a non-threatening gesture. I didn't know the extent of it, she said quietly. I knew they asked you for money sometimes, and I heard comments about your obligation to help family. But I had no idea about the forgery or the amounts involved. But you knew enough to feel uncomfortable, I observed. Enough to avoid looking me in the eye when I arrived. Vanessa nodded, shame evident in her posture. At last month's dinner, Adriana was talking about today, about the plan to officially cut ties with you now that. She hesitated. Now that what? I prompted. Now that they'd gotten everything worthwhile from you, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I should have warned you. I'm sorry. The confirmation that my exclusion had been planned once I was deemed no longer financially useful should have hurt, but instead felt like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. The clarity was almost refreshing after years of gaslighting and confusion. Thank you for telling me the truth, I said simply. What will you do now? Vanessa asked. Move forward, I replied. Build a life with people who actually care about me, not what I can provide for them. She nodded, understanding the implicit message that our relationship too stood at a crossroads. For what it's worth, I always admired you, Natalie. Your independence, your success, your resilience. They resented what they couldn't control. Before I could respond, the front door flew open again, and Adriana stormed out, Marcus close behind. Her mascara had created dark rivers down her cheeks, but her expression was pure fury rather than sorrow. You think you've won? She shouted, advancing toward me with such aggression that Vanessa stepped between us protectively. You think anyone will believe these lies about your own family? The evidence speaks for itself, I replied calmly. Bank records don't lie, Adriana. Forged signatures don't lie. Your own emails don't lie. I'll ruin you, she threatened, her voice rising hysterically. I'll tell everyone what a cold, heartless sister you've always been. How you abandoned family in their time of need. Marcus attempted to pull her back toward the house, recognizing the legal danger her threats presented, especially if I was indeed recording. Adriana, stop. Let's discuss this inside. She shook him off violently. No. She needs to understand what she's done. How dare you threaten us after everything we've done for you? The absurdity of her statement, implying they had somehow done me favors while systematically defrauding me, might have been laughable in different circumstances. Instead, it illuminated the profound depth of her self-deception and entitlement. What exactly have you done for me, Adriana? I asked quietly. Name one thing you've done to support me rather than take from me. Her mouth opened and closed several times, no ready answer available despite her certainty. This simple question seemed to confound her more than any evidence I had presented. Marcus, attempting damage control, stepped forward with a different approach. Natalie, surely we can resolve this as family. There's no need for attorneys or formal agreements. We can work out repayment among ourselves. That opportunity existed for 3 years, I replied. You chose exploitation instead. Now we do this legally or through the criminal justice system. Those are the only options remaining. My mother appeared in the doorway, having composed herself somewhat, but still clutching a tissue dramatically. Natalie, darling, you're upset and not thinking clearly. Come back inside, so we can discuss this rationally. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, I countered. And there's nothing left to discuss. You'll hear from Benjamin tomorrow. She switched tactics immediately, hand pressed to her chest as she swayed slightly. I don't feel well. The stress you're causing could trigger my heart condition. My father appeared behind her, supporting her with practiced concern. Now look what you've done. Your mother needs her medication. Is this what you wanted? In previous years, this performance would have immediately triggered my guilt and compliance. The medical emergency that mysteriously resolved once I acquiesced to whatever they wanted. The pattern was so familiar I could predict each beat of their routine. If Mom requires medical attention, I encourage you to call 911, I suggested practically. They can assess whether her condition requires treatment or acting lessons. The shocked expressions confirmed I had broken the established script. The knowledge that their tactics no longer worked seemed to distress them more than the financial consequences they faced. As the standoff continued on the front lawn, I realized there was one final task I needed to complete. Excuse me, I said, walking past their blocking formation and back toward the house. Where do you think you're going? My father demanded, attempting to physically bar my path. To collect my property, I replied firmly. Unless you'd like to add theft charges to the existing legal issues? He hesitated, then stepped aside reluctantly. I entered the house, now eerily silent compared to the ongoing drama outside, and headed directly to my childhood bedroom. Unlike the rest of the house, this room remained largely unchanged, a preserved museum to a daughter they had never truly seen or valued. I ignored the mementos and photographs, focusing instead on the specific items I had come to retrieve: a small jewelry box containing my grandmother's simple pearl earrings, given directly to me before her passing, a leather-bound journal documenting my college years, and, most importantly, my grandmother's handwritten recipe book that had mysteriously disappeared when family heirlooms were being distributed. The recipe book was not in my room as expected. Suspecting its location, I went to the kitchen and opened the decorative box on the counter where my mother kept frequently used recipes. There it was, my grandmother's book with my name clearly inscribed on the inside cover, being used as if it were communal property rather than my specific inheritance. I collected these items in a small bag and returned to the front door, where the family argument had devolved further. Adriana was now sobbing dramatically while Marcus attempted to reason with my father about legal options. My mother continued her performance of physical distress while Vanessa stood apart, watching the scene with evident discomfort. "I'm leaving now," I announced, not particularly caring if anyone heard me. "You have until 5 p.m. tomorrow to contact Benjamin with your decision." As I walked toward my car, my father made one final attempt. "Natalie, be reasonable. We're talking about family here. Surely that means something to you." I paused, considering his words carefully before responding. "It did mean something. That's why your betrayal warranted documentation rather than just walking away." With that final statement, I got into my car and drove away from the house, the family, and the dysfunction that had shaped so much of my life. The folder I left behind, one of several copies, would continue its work of revealing truths too long hidden behind the facade of family loyalty. In my rearview mirror, the tableau of their disintegrating unity grew smaller until it disappeared entirely, replaced by the open road ahead and possibilities unlimited by their expectations or demands. Benjamin's call came precisely at 5:07 p.m. the day after Thanksgiving. "They've agreed to the repayment terms," he informed me, his tone professional but with an undercurrent of satisfaction. "All parties signed the agreements, without modification. They've also agreed to the no-contact provision for a minimum of 5 years." I sat in my living room, watching November rain trace patterns down my windows as I absorbed this information. The resolution felt anticlimactic after years of manipulation and the dramatic confrontation just 24 hours earlier. "Did they say anything else?" I asked, uncertain what response I actually wanted. "Your father attempted to include a letter to you, which I declined as per your instructions about no communication. Your sister's husband asked several questions about whether this agreement prevented criminal charges in the future. I confirmed that it does, provided they adhere to all repayment terms." The practical matters were addressed efficiently over the next weeks. My parents liquidated several investment accounts to make the initial lump sum payment. Adriana and Marcus refinanced their home to cover their portion of the debt. Monthly automated payments were established through a third-party service that would alert Benjamin to any defaults. The financial resolution progressed with surprising smoothness. The emotional aftermath proved more complex. Dr. Harper, the therapist I began seeing weekly after Thanksgiving, helped me understand the stages of grief I was experiencing, not just for the family I had lost, but for the family I had never actually had despite decades of hoping. "You're mourning a relationship that existed primarily in your hopes and efforts, not in reality," she explained during our third session. "That's often more painful than losing something that truly existed, because there's no shared memory to preserve." Through our work together, patterns emerged that stretched back to childhood: my role as the responsible yet emotionally neglected daughter, the normalized exploitation disguised as family obligation, the constant moving of goalposts for earning acceptance and love. What still bothers me is how easily I fell for it, I admitted during one particularly difficult session. "I'm a financial advisor. I counsel people daily about protecting their assets, recognizing scams, establishing healthy boundaries around money. How did I miss what was happening in my own family? Because they had unique access to your emotional vulnerabilities, Dr. Harper replied. They installed those buttons and knew exactly how to push them. Expertise in finance doesn't automatically translate to emotional immunity, especially with people who've known you your entire life. The journals I kept during this period documented my progress from confusion and self-doubt to clarity and, eventually, a tentative peace. Early entries questioned whether I had overreacted or misinterpreted family dynamics. Later pages showed growing recognition of the manipulation tactics I had normalized throughout my life. Realize today that Mom's medical emergencies always coincided with me questioning financial requests I wrote 3 months after Thanksgiving. Convenient timing that never required actual medical intervention, just my compliance and guilt. Physical symptoms accompanied the emotional processing, insomnia that gradually improved, tension headaches that required conscious relaxation techniques, a persistent knot in my stomach that finally dissolved around month 4 of therapy. My body had carried the stress of maintaining unhealthy relationships far longer than I had recognized. As the immediate emotional intensity began to subside, I focused on the more constructive process of building what Dr. Harper called my chosen family, relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than obligation or utility. Sophia became even more important in my life, our friendship deepening through her unwavering support during the most difficult periods. I always knew they didn't deserve you, she told me over dinner 6 months after the confrontation. But watching you stand up for yourself was honestly inspiring. Vanessa and I established cautious communication that evolved gradually into a genuine connection. Unlike my immediate family, she had reached out with a sincere apology and request for forgiveness. I should have said something sooner, she acknowledged during our first careful lunch together. I was caught between family loyalty and knowing what they were doing was wrong. That's not an excuse, just the reality I'm still working through. Her honesty and willingness to respect my boundaries made reconnection possible in a way that would never be an option with my parents or sister. We established a new relationship based on who we were as adults rather than our shared childhood experiences. Perhaps the most unexpected development came through my professional life. The experience of financial exploitation by family members gave me unique insight that proved valuable to clients facing similar situations. I noticed some concerning patterns in your parents' requests for financial assistance. I told a client who had sought advice about elder care costs that seemed suspiciously high. Would you be comfortable if I asked some additional questions about how these funds are being managed? The subsequent investigation revealed her brother had been inflating care costs and pocketing the difference. My personal experience helped me recognize subtle red flags others might have missed, and my empathy allowed me to address the situation with appropriate sensitivity. This pattern repeated often enough that I eventually developed a specialty in family financial dynamics, even speaking at industry conferences about recognizing and addressing financial exploitation within families. The experience that had caused me such pain became a tool for helping others avoid similar situations. When the first anniversary of that fateful Thanksgiving approached, I decided to reclaim the holiday by hosting my own dinner. Sophia and her husband, Vanessa, colleagues who had become friends, and neighbors who had offered support during difficult days gathered in my home, now fully renovated to reflect my personal taste rather than echoing my parents' preferences as it once had. I prepared several dishes using recipes from my grandmother's book, connecting to family heritage while creating new traditions. The table conversation flowed naturally, without the undercurrents of tension and hidden agendas that had characterized family gatherings throughout my life. As we finished dessert, my grandmother's apple pie made with meticulous attention to her handwritten notes, I looked around at the faces of people who chose to be in my life rather than exploiting biological connection as an entitlement to my resources. I'd like to propose a toast, I said, raising my glass. To chosen family, to boundaries that protect rather than walls that imprison, and to the courage to recognize our own worth even when others don't. Glasses clinked as genuine warmth filled the room, so different from the performative unity of my family's last Thanksgiving. In that moment, I realized I had built something more authentic and valuable than what I had lost. The repayment checks continue to arrive monthly, clinical transactions that represent the only remaining connection to the people who share my DNA but failed to earn the privilege of family. Each deposit serves as a reminder of both betrayal and reclamation, the systematic exploitation I survived and the strength I discovered in its aftermath. Family isn't defined by biology or legal documents. It's created through consistent care, mutual respect, and genuine love, lessons I learned through their absence rather than their presence. While the path to this understanding proved painful, the resulting clarity brought freedom I couldn't have imagined when placing that folder on the Thanksgiving table 1 year ago. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between maintaining family relationships and protecting your own well-being? Drop a comment sharing your experience or how you'd handle a situation like mine. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more conversations about establishing healthy boundaries and recognizing your own worth. Share this video with someone who might need permission to prioritize their well-being over toxic family dynamics. Thank you for joining me today, and remember, sometimes the family we create matters more than the family we're born into.